Welcome, everyone, to our discussion today. Was that malicious? When cybersecurity threats are sneakier than ever, it's okay to cry wolf. My name is Michelle Rowe. I run diversity, leadership, and organization development at Insight, and I am incredibly happy to be here today to help moderate this discussion about something so incredibly important and something that we are all experiencing in some way in our world today. So the title of today's session is a little playful, but it does speak to the unfortunate reality that cyber attacks today really are very convincing. Employee vigilance is absolutely critical, but unfortunately, it's not enough. So cyber threats truly are sneakier than ever. And that's why the title of this is what it is. And it's really, we have to keep company information safe, and we need to make sure that we're keeping operations in control. So this is a really big challenge for organizations today. We are pleased to have two incredible guests here today with very long resumes and hands-on experience managing IT and cybersecurity. You saw them both just pop up. We have Jeff Shumway, CIO at Insight, and Ian Pratt, who is the Global Head of Security at HP Inc. Welcome, both of you. We are so happy to have you here today.
It's a pleasure.
All right, so in just a minute, we are going to turn this over to Jeff and Ian, but I wanted to let you know that we will be doing a Q&A session at the end. So while they're talking, if you have any questions at all, please make sure to put them in the comment section, and we will try to get to all that we can. So I'm going to turn it over to the two of you. Take it away, Jeff.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Just to get started, and Ian, I have a question for you to get us started here. I think it's difficult for anyone to believe that we can be completely secure and confident that we can defend against all cyber attacks. I've been using a term recently that I read recently of being cyber insecure, and I have to admit I am cyber insecure that we can defend against all attacks. Recently, with nation-state sponsored attacks that have been occurring, and they're in the news every day. In addition to those, we have the organized crime type attacks that are occurring, where they're motivated by greed and a big payday through ransomware. How do you see us moving forward? I know there's so much complexity in this topic. How do you see us moving forward with this, and how do we deal with our cyber insecurity?
Right. Well, it's a very dynamic landscape, as you've pointed out. And, the only way that we can approach it is to take a risk-based approach and really identify what's the most important thing in our business. What are the things which really mustn't happen? And then put appropriate controls around them, and then figure out what the next most important thing is, and figure out what we're going to do for that. But it's certainly, it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all approach, whether it's across different businesses or even within a single business. It's got to be this risk-based approach, and it's something we've got to be proactive about. It's gone are the days where security was, well, I installed AV on all of my machines. I'm done. I've got a firewall. It's really about planning thinking through what could happen, and then figuring out how you plan for that, how you mitigate the consequences, how you try and stop it from happening, but at least as much about how you mitigate the consequences and mitigate the damage to stop things from spreading. That's the real challenge.
Yeah, thank you. I can't agree more. I do think it comes down to for me as the CIO of a company that is responsible for and wake up every morning wondering if today is the day. I think most competent IT leaders think that way, and I think they should. But you wake up in the morning and you wonder, what's going to happen in my system today? What didn't I think about? And so when that happens, I bring the team in and we talk about the fundamentals. And we're big believers in the NIST approach of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. I think those are the fundamentals that I think you're referring to as well from just a risk-based perspective. Each of those areas, we have to know what's in our system, what's in our environment. I'd love to get your thoughts on, do you think most companies really know what's in their network, what's in their domain that they have to protect?
Well, although there's a lot of evidence to suggest that companies don't know quite what's in their, in their environment. And also, rather than thinking about it as a single environment, we should be thinking about it as lots of different, isolated or at least partially isolated environments where we can have opportunities to contain things if they go wrong. I think that's one of the key tools that we have at our disposal is to try and contain the impact of something going wrong. And this sort of whole notion about having the enterprise network and everything hanging off the enterprise network, we have to move away from that and really isolate the things that we care most about, and put appropriate controls around them. And I think it's those kind of approaches to where we can contain threats that are going to yield better results than hoping that we're going to be able to detect and get ahead of everything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that within the networks, within the environment of the companies we're working with, most don't know what they have, and if they do they know what operating systems are running, what applications are running on those servers or on the endpoints? And are they patched appropriately? Are we up to date as close as we should with security patching? Which for me has become I'm a bit dogmatic about it now, about making sure that we apply those security patches when they come out. And it's obviously with recent issues around vendors being attacked, and these are trusted vendors of ours being attacked. What do you think about that? I believe in keeping up to date with patching as a fundamental, and just making sure that we're right on time to get those things done. But with recent attacks, and they've been all over the news, what do you think about that? Is that still a correct process?
I think it's what we have to do, because we know that the alternative doesn't work of not patching. So let's forget that as an option. But I think what we need to do is to be careful about picking the vendors that we rely on. We need to make sure that all of our vendors are if we're taking software from a vendor and putting it in our environment, that we believe that the vendor is taking security seriously and has a track record of that. And that's something which is very hard today as someone purchasing a service or software to really be able to tell, because there's this big gulf between having a set of accreditations, whether it's SOC 2 and ISO 27001, etc., and really taking security seriously and actually having a real security program that's driving for continual improvement. And that is a real challenge. So I think we've got to expect more from our vendors to ensure that they are doing the best job that they can to stop their build infrastructure from getting compromised, that they are doing a good job of validating what they're getting from their upstream vendors, because you only have to attack a vendor that is supplying a bunch of software vendors, and you've got a multiplicative effect on that attack. And I think what we saw just a few weeks ago, perhaps we'll look back on it as a bit of a watershed moment, because I think it's the first time I can think of where a supply chain attack was used for ransomware. Now, we've certainly seen supply chain attacks used in the past. Obviously, it's standard modus operandi of nation states. We've even seen them used for direct financial theft, whether it's stealing credit card numbers or injecting transactions into the SWIFT system. But for something which has traditionally been regarded as very the low end of the spectrum of attacks, ransomware, now we've seen this move to enterprise ransomware. The fact that significant sums of money can be raised through ransomware. They're playing the long game now, because they've got the return is there to do that. And I think this was the first time I can recall ransomware being the objective of a supply chain attack. And that should be scary to all of us, that any software vendor is now in scope. If they've got a customer base, not necessarily an enterprise customer base or a government customer base, but any customer base which an attacker thinks that they might be able to get ransoms from, they'd better pull their socks up from a security point of view for sure.
Yeah, it's a great response. I think it feeds the comment I made earlier about knowing what's in your environment as well, knowing what tools you have that you believe are protecting, what locks you have on the system, what you're using throughout your system to protect, and maybe we have too much. Do you have thoughts on that? Maybe we have too many tools overlapping that are creating this invisibility to what's out there.
Well, as a CISO, one of the most powerful tools we have, but it's a double-edged sword, is standardization. Where we, by simplifying, moving to a number of standard ways of doing things, reducing the number of tools, so that we can focus our efforts on doing a good job around a smaller set of tools. There are downsides to that in that sometimes diversity is good, certainly from a resilience point of view. If you've standardized around one particular web browser and there's a 0-day for that web browser, you can't just stop everyone from using the web. Having 2 web browsers might actually be better in that scenario. But standardization is certainly certainly helpful. Having more tools than you need, more different applications than you need, is certainly going to certainly contributing to the problem. But it's also somewhat contrary to the direction that things have been heading over the last few years, with individual departments and perhaps even individuals doing things on a far more self-service basis. And there are, that's actually good from a users like being able to do that. But it does introduce additional exposure, and particularly when those you've then got things within the network which can update themselves that may be compromised upstream. It's worrying.
Yeah, very good, very good. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and talk about the end user. We can talk about networks all day long and zero trust, and maybe we can get back to that in a minute. But the end user, being a target of the attack vector, because it's an easy way in. I'm one of the weakest links. I am subject to those attacks. I am capable of clicking on a link when I shouldn't, and many others are as well. What are your thoughts on how we better train our teammates, our employees to prevent a lot of those attacks?
Yeah, well, absolutely. If you look at the statistics, about 70% of enterprise breaches start on an endpoint, where the point of entry for the attacker is an endpoint. And in almost all cases, the way that the attacker gets onto that endpoint is they're actually invited by the end user as a result of them clicking on something. Almost all of these attacks require some user interaction. You have to go back to at least 3 years now to get to the last widespread worm that moved around endpoints without requiring a click. It really is user interaction that's required. And the attackers are just very good at exploiting fear, curiosity, and misplaced trust in employees to get them to click on things. And and training is certainly part of the solution. Every company should do training. It's good from a hygiene point of view. But I think particularly what we've seen in the last 18 months, where people have been working from home, that's where they haven't been sitting next to someone else in the office where they could turn around to them and say, does this look legitimate? We've seen higher click-through rates on these kind of attacks. That's part of it, but also we're seeing these attacks get more sophisticated because the attackers are doing a better job of using some simple machine learning techniques to make it such that the thing that you click on looks more real and convincing. There's a particularly interesting technique we've seen growing by some more sophisticated threat actors, where they use a technique called thread hijacking, where having compromised one machine, they've got access to a user's inbox. They can see all of the different email conversations that are happening, both with other folk inside the company and in folks in other companies, and then perhaps add a message to those conversations. And if you're a recipient of one of these messages, it looks like it's coming from someone you know. It's got the right, it's a conversation you're having with them. And if they've done a good job, the text, the reply, may seem a bit irrelevant if they've done it in a totally automated fashion, but it would be pretty good if they've used some ML to do that. And when you click on it, you're going to have a problem. And no matter how much training you've done, it's come from a user's email account. There's no amount of looking at headers and figuring out whether it's legitimate or not. It looks perfectly good, and that's a real challenge.
So couldn't agree more. The fact is we have to continue to educate, and it has to be ongoing, consistent, at least monthly, and give variations in tips and tricks, what to look out for. The things that you just mentioned, I think, are critical. And then I think it's important that we test people and give them examples from a phishing campaign, what they look like, and then test our people. I know I've actually done it at my company over the last 18 months, and we started out and the results weren't very good. Just to be really honest, people click away on those things because they are taken in by a lot of them. They are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and they do appeal to our sense of duty, our greed, our fear. Those are all things that these bad actors are very, very good at exploiting. Mm-hmm. So we put these in now. 18 months later, after series of training, we're seeing a marked improvements in the number of people that are actually clicking, the number of people that are reporting the incidents as well. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, I believe. I don't think it'll ever go away because the sophistication level continues to increase. One thing I would like to get your impression on is the bad actors seem to be better at this than we are. They're better at offense than we are at defense. And I'd like to get your take on it because they seem to have all the skills in the world, which we find difficult to get and hire. But these people are really good at what they do.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Some of the work which we've been doing, working with criminologists, actually looking at what has happened, and we've really seen over the last few years a criminal supply chain develop. So it's not like these groups, and they are groups. There are experts that handle each stage of the attack. So there really is somebody whose job it is to craft the lures, possibly using machine learning to craft the lures, to make them good to click on. There'll be someone else who's responsible for fulfillment, making sure that email gets to you from a server in your country, so it's not crossing any geo boundaries. There are lots of different organizations that are taking part in these attacks, making them as convincing and as effective as they are today. And that's driven by the huge return on investment they can get from through ransoms and the other ways they have of monetizing these attacks. Yeah,
for sure. They're very well organized. They even sharing within organizations, code bases, attack vectors. It's absolutely amazing to me, and it is truly an organized crime effort. But I don't see. I've listened to some of the comments the president of the United States has made, but I don't see a global effort to combat these attacks and these groups. And some of these are unfriendly nation states to the Western world. I'm just curious what your thoughts are about the ability to attack these things. Can we be effective?
I think we're grateful of small wins right now, where we managed to take down the command and control infrastructure for a given attack, and we regard that as a success. But in terms of actually, the folks responsible, having their doors knocked, that just very rarely happens. And that's because obviously it's a global problem, and you've got all of the usual challenges with the reach of law and even the relationship between some of these organizations and the countries that are hosting them. It's very murky, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Sure. Moving back to and I'm bouncing around a bit, but moving back around to the discussion of the end user. There've been efforts underway, obviously, that admitting that we're the weakest link. We have to do things at the endpoint to harden that. Multi-factor authentication, having the ability to remove or greatly reduce access to administrative rights on the device. Where do you see the balance between, taking those initiatives, locking down things, and allowing the business to flow well and smoothly? Because people like to be able to install software on their laptops. How do you see that, and how do you see us addressing it well? Because I think it's a delicate balance, and sometimes we go too far one way or the other.
Yeah, it is. There's a real need to empower users, while ensuring that it's done in a safe fashion. And we've certainly seen some organizations that have gone down a path of really locking things down, controlling where people can even point a web browser at. And it has to be said that has been effective in many cases in terms of increasing security, but in terms of user empowerment and actually enabling workflows, it's been highly problematic. And I think it is about getting the right balance and really trying to design some of our systems to be able to better contain things when they go wrong. I think that's a key approach. And you mentioned earlier zero trust, and I think that's a big part of it. We talk about zero trust as it applies to networks, but really zero trust is a set of sound engineering principles that have been around forever, certainly since the 60s and 70s. And this idea of least privilege, applying the principle of least privilege, and as you said, removing administrator rights wherever you can, just a sensible thing to do. But we can take that in a far more fine-grained fashion. So, requiring, that you need certain permissions to be able to access some service, or, even if you think about it on something like a laptop, if you think about it, it's kind of crazy today, right? That if I open a Word document and, that I've received from someone an email, and if that document turns out to be malicious, it's then running code as me and can do anything I can do on the system. That's nuts. We should never design our systems. All of our systems were designed in a world long before, the internet and these kind of ideas where you'd be receiving code from people all over the world and running them on your system. That just wasn't part of the design goal. And it's now how we look at designing systems that are better able to cope with that, to actually isolate things, to enable us to reduce the attack surface and make systems more resilient.
Again, it's so true. I think that knowing the weakest link is the human being, we have to take action. Once the bad actor is able to gain access, so being invited in, I like the way you phrase that, being invited into the system, the idea that data can be exfiltrated, that there can be lateral movement within and behave just like you, and maybe even elevate your permissions to that of administrator and do other harm within the environment. For me, the balance weighs in going ahead and activating those restrictions, and sometimes that's a difficult topic to have with people, because there's one extra lock they have to work on before they leave their home. It's one more thing they have to do to install a driver. It's inefficient. At least that's how it's described. But the fact that the risk is so great, it makes sense that for me it weighs in the direction of adding that extra security. from a team competency perspective, I'm very lucky. I work with a large team of cybersecurity experts, both internal to IT and external to IT. It's been difficult building that team over the last 2 years, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to find those resources to come into the teams. What do you say to a company that may not be able to afford hiring, a group of 10 people or 20 people? Where do they go for those resources that can help guide them?
Yeah, well, obviously there are services. Outsourcing some of this is certainly possible to managed security providers, or to that matter, companies like HP. We have services around it, but it's certainly, I think it's something which everyone is struggling with. How you get those, hire those skills. Certainly in the mid-market companies, I think it has been very challenging. Certainly, if you want to hire a hunt team, to actually be able to proactively look at things across your network. I mean, that is something which really only enterprises and government organizations have really been able to do. But you really want, you'd love to have that happening in your network, because it's how you're going to get ahead of things, and it's not just the enterprises and governments which are going to be hit by the sophisticated threats these days. So I think that services is a key part of that, and taking advantage of the fact that these companies, I only speak for HP, but we have a lot of customers, we get a lot of data, and that gives us a lot of insight into what is happening. There's a lot of economies of scale around this in terms of being able to understand that data and then be able to hone in on where problems are.
Solid. From just a self-education perspective, when there's so much out there right now, so much data, so much material, I personally find it difficult to keep up. On a daily basis, I probably get about 25 emails from various security vendors and with great information. But I would spend all my time just reading that, because there's so much information coming out, and it changes daily. There are common trends, but there are a lot of changing elements of that. How do you keep up with that? How are you keeping up with it personally, just with all the information coming at us on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got different categories of information. Certainly understanding all of the new indicators of compromise, indicators of attack. At least we're now seeing some standards emerge around that with Styx Taxi for being able to get that information into your environment and then be able to take advantage of it in an automated fashion. Seeing if any of your hosts have been to any of these web servers that have been compromised, or any of these documents that someone had been seen on your network. And then there's all the information about what software, what new vulnerabilities have emerged, what new software updates are available, and it's more of an IT challenge. But back to where we started really with the do you turn on automatic updates, and or do you choose to manage each of these things independently? And I think there's a lot that's saying that it's better to get the patches out quickly, and to if you've got a patch, or anybody receives a patch, what kind of vetting are you going to do on it? Who would have spotted that? In the SolarWinds example, where that actually turned out to be compromised, nobody was going to to spot that in advance, despite what people may have said after the fact. Nobody did. So I think we just have to get that information and then act on it, get it deployed quickly, and make sure it's not breaking anything, then get it deployed widely.
Great. Agreed. Ian, hey, thank you. I appreciate all the feedback also. I think it's been a great discussion. I'd like to invite Michelle back in so we can take some questions from the audience.
All right. Thank you both for that incredible discussion. I actually do have, there were some that came in from the audience, and I'm going to look over here and ask you that in just a minute. But while I was listening to you talk, and you were talking about the end user, and I agree, Ian, I love that you said it's that we invite these attackers in. We don't mean to, but that happens. And we talked about, clicking on links, opening attachments. Is there anything else that we as the end user need to be aware of? Are there other common mistakes that we are making that could actually put us at risk?
Well, obviously, another kind of attack that's quite common is credential phishing attacks, where people are entering their credentials into web pages, and I think that's actually something which a lot of companies, without thinking about it, actively encourage. Like, certainly within my organization, we did a lot of work to make sure that the only time you should ever enter your password is after hitting Control-Alt-Delete when logging into your PC. But a lot of organizations almost train people to type passwords into a web browser. Their business password into a web browser. That's something we really need to stamp out. And as a result, users will be surprised if they get to asked to enter a password into a web browser. Hopefully, they won't do it, and extend that for all kinds of passwords. That's a key thing we need to make people aware of.
Yeah, I do believe we need to do more with biometrics, where we're using fingerprints, facial recognition. Those are tools that are out there available today, and we should be doing more of that. The password is the weak element. We rely on people to self-select a password that they have to remember, and they have 10 other ones for their homes and everything else they work on. So it's incredibly difficult to remember all those. So they make it simple. Password 1, password 2, password 3. Those are the kind of things that are easily hacked, and we see it. I think also at the device, thumb drives. How often do people just walk around? I have a drawer full of thumb drives at my home, and if you don't know where they came from, if you don't know where they originated, you do not plug them into your system. You don't plug them into the USB drive, and yet it does happen. There have been many cases where they have campaigns where they'll take a group of 10, 15 of these things, put them in a little basket, and put them in a lobby of a building, and they will be taken. People can't resist grabbing one of those things and plugging it in. That's something we have to avoid. We have to learn that that's part of the hygiene is don't do it.
Yeah. I'll just drop a few in a car park and see employees pick them up and start using them. That really does happen. It's a favorite technique used by red team testers. It's probably used by bad guys as well.
They seem very simple, Michelle, on the surface, but those are some things that I think keeping your passwords a little more sophisticated than maybe using biometric tools, and then don't use anything on your system that you're not absolutely sure where it came from.
Yeah, and thank you both for sharing that, because a couple of those I would have thought about, but some of those I would have never have thought about. I mean, the idea that there's a bowl in the lobby so it looks like it's supposed to be there and it's like a gift for you, I would have never even thought about that. So taking that a step further with what we're talking about crying wolf, I think my question for you is there's so many different ways for us to, without meaning to, let these attackers in. So why aren't people crying wolf? And also, why is it okay to? What do we think is holding us back from actually raising our hand and saying, okay, I think something happened?
I think internally it's, and I have spoken with people that they're just not sure what it means. And we know it's not a discipline issue. It's just simply I take a bet when we go to the UK and you're on the tube, they say see it, sort it. I forget exactly what it is. See it, sort it. Right? It's just getting used to being able to report those things, saying this looks suspicious to me. Am I right or am I wrong? It doesn't matter, and we're happy to click on the button, allow it to be forwarded, and we'll look it over, and it has no impact on the teammate, and we need to develop that culture where people are seeing sorting it more often.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to got a few CISOs where they've actually had employees, pay small ransoms rather than actually own up that they're making a mistake. And then the CISO finds out down the line because those machines start showing an indicator of compromise. But that's from what I hear, it really isn't uncommon that people would rather, because of the culture in the company, they would rather try and make it go away than actually own up to a mistake. And that's clearly something we can work on from a cultural point of view of encouraging people to come forward and the no blame culture. And I certainly think for some of these, when someone's just clicked on a link, we really can't be. And you need to look at what did they actually click on. But some of these are so convincing you can't assume that they've done something dumb. Some of them are very convincing. And if your job is if you work in HR, it's pretty much your job to open every resume, CV that someone sends you, right? That is part of the job. You can't blame people for that. Same if you're in purchasing. If you receive an invoice, you've got to look at it.
Right. And I love that you both just said that. Create that culture where people aren't afraid to come forward, and then no blame. Now, I'm going to take that a little bit of a step further, but kind of in a different way. When you were talking about fear, right, that these attackers really kind of rely on that fear, what are other ways that these cyber criminals are really leveraging our humanity in order to trick us?
I think from go ahead.
I was going to say curiosity is, another key one. Getting, whether it's cat videos or, like at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of COVID-19, themed lures with, information about what was happening, and that's sort of all died away now. But it was very common if you go back 15 months or so.
Yeah, and in some of our campaigns that we've used, we use that four-letter word, free. If you're offering something for free and you appeal to someone's, wow, I can get this deal or something for free to do this, click away.
Right.
It's part of that I'm going to get something for nothing approach that it seems to appeal to us.
All right. Now
I was going to say it's the misplaced trust. It's where you think you've received something from someone who you do trust, but it's misplaced because it wasn't actually from them. And that's the one that's really hard to deal with. Very forgivable.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you were just talking about really the way that things have changed over the last 15 months. I am going to ask you a question from the audience, and it's about that. It says, where do you see the balance point between the recent modern workplace push to enable employees access and productivity as much as possible, and really securing systems against the immediate increase in breaches and attacks?
Jeff, do you want to kick off with that?
Where do you see the balance between the recent modern workplace push to enable employees access and productivity as much as possible and securing systems against the immediate increase in breaches? So we do know that with the modern, especially the modern hybrid environment, where we have people in the office and at home, the rules have to be the same. I think it goes back to those fundamentals we spoke about, also about ensuring that the endpoint is as secure as we possibly can get it through multi-factor authentication, through solid passwords or biometric screening, as just a minimum, and then train on those. I think it's more important than ever that we do those things now.
Yeah, I think it's really driven a number of trends which were happening anyway, and it's certainly the case when we move back to the office. We want to keep many of the good things that have happened in enabling people to work remotely, and more of a move to zero trust and more fine-grained segmentation of access to things backed up by multi-factor authentication. You should be doing that when you're in the office as well. Just because that machine's sitting on an office network, we shouldn't trust it unconditionally. It should still be participating with all of those auth steps that you had before.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I think they're counter practices, whether you're from your mobile office or inside the office. We have to have that renewed focus and alertness on cybersecurity. And I don't think people do that as often. I think it's so critical right now. We continue to just talk about it, change the culture, train.
Absolutely. Now, you were just talking about zero trust. So for those watching, how or when do you implement zero trust?
Well, I mean, you really need to think of zero trust as it's a set of principles, the same before, a set of sound engineering principles. There are, I think it's important to look at what the background of it is. There aren't, you shouldn't think of companies as selling zero trust solutions. It's a set of principles which you want to apply to an environment. There are products out there which can help you with a zero trust architecture. And you want to think about it not just for the network, but actually, pervasively throughout what you do, through the endpoints and through what you're doing from an infrastructure point of view as well, about really looking at how you identify the given things you want to protect, figuring out what the least privilege that's required for doing it, and then implementing some kind of segmentation around it, micro segmentation at a network level or even within the PC to ensure that it's contained and that just because something else has been breached, it doesn't result in in this other compartment being breached. These are sound principles we should be applying everywhere, and I think it's something we should all be thinking about in how we architect our systems to be secure, to be resilient.
Yeah, I think from a zero trust when it comes to the network in very simple terms is we should assume that just because you're authenticated in doesn't mean you're not part of a hostile environment, because we have to consider that every part of this environment is hostile, and we have to continue to authenticate and challenge on each piece, whether it's a device, a user, or some type of network flow. It always has to be challenged.
Mm-hmm. I love that you both said that, because again, you're sharing so much with so many people out there, but also me as the end user, right? These aren't things that I would think about. Going in and being authenticated and using my fingerprint or whatever it is, I would think that it was safe, right? But knowing that it could be, somebody could be trying to attack us at any time, and always being really vigilant about that. One other question, if we are cyber insecure, so Jeff, you talked about cyber insecurity earlier. So if we are cyber insecure, should we be relying on IoT and network-based technology to run our business's daily operations?
Well, from my perspective, I don't know if I would say we would rely on it completely, but it is one more tool in the arsenal that we should implement that will be looking for behavioral-based activity. The fact is, Ian comes into work every day and he logs in and he does a standard set of things. He does an ABC every day. But one day, he's not doing that anymore. He's off doing something else completely out of the ordinary. He's over in the general ledger of the company. That's something there should be blocked, flagged, let us know that is there's something wrong with that behavior and we want to alert on it. And it could be perfectly legitimate, but let's be safe. Let's err on the side of safety and connect it. And that's where machine learning and the AI tools do very well. They look for those behaviors and alert on the anomalous things that they find. Ian?
Yeah, and I think when it comes to sort of business, IoT networks, factory networks, things like that. Again, this is an area where we've got to look at segmentation. Isolating things from the rest of the network, and having appropriate controls around it. And if you look at how so many of these attacks go down, it's about the attacker wanting to get onto the machine of a privileged user, and then just waiting for them to log in to something that's high value. And whether that's into the factory IoT network or into the cloud administration panel. These are the kind of operations which where the bad guys are really targeting, and it's these areas. It's the sysadmins itself. We've really got to put a lot of effort around to make sure that what they are doing is secure. That those operations are really segmented off from the rest of the environment. So just because someone has got into your endpoint network, it should not mean that that's going to result in An admin workstation, even if an admin workstation is compromised, shouldn't result in the compromise of this IoT network, factory network that you really care about.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
All right, so we are almost out of time. So I did want to ask each of you one more question. And that question is, what is your top security advice for IT leaders today? Jeff, do you want to start?
Sure. Mine is what I started out with, and that's focus on the fundamentals, making sure you know what's in your environment. I do believe strongly in the NIST approach and having a NIST assessment to, if you're starting out and you just don't know where to start out yet, to have someone come in and do a NIST assessment, define those opportunities, and create a plan and start working those opportunities. That's my advice right now.
Perfect. Ian, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, my advice would be very similar. It's it is a hostile environment. You've got to to plan assuming failure, and it's about mitigation strategies as much as anything.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you. All right. So to those of us who joined us today, thank you so much for being here. Jeff, Ian, we cannot thank you enough for being here and sharing your incredible wealth of knowledge. This information is so helpful, and we really appreciate that. For those of you out there, if you'd like to hear more, please visit us at insight.com/wolfsecurity. And thank you, everybody, again. Jeff, Ian, thank you, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Later.